Tropical Storm Eta, one of the more unpredictable storms that we have tracked so far in 2020, now expected to hit the northern Gulf Coast, an area already battered by a brutal, record-breaking hurricane season. Our meteorologists are live here on Track in the Tropics with the latest track and to answer your questions here live in a live Q&A. Hey there, folks. JB Buno being joined here once again by meteorologist Julie Phillips here with you on Track in the Tropics. Moments away from being joined here by meteorologist Ian Oliver standing by at the wall. We're continuing to monitor all the developments, all the twists and turns with Tropical Storm Eta and where it is projected to hit. As a reminder, you can use the hashtags that we have here on your screen. Hashtag Hey Julie, hashtag Hey Ian, hashtag Hey JB. I'll have my eyes here on the Facebook Live comment sections for Facebook pages. Really across the southeastern United States, we want to hear from you and get to your questions. So start filing them in here with those hashtags that you see here on your screen. The last one that we took last episode was from Dolores here. Hashtag Hey JB. Okay. We've had enough now, and boy, Ian, have we ever had enough of the 2020 hurricane season, but Eta is still out there and expected to hit now the northern Gulf Coast.
You said it, JB. Good afternoon. We actually, last night, as if we didn't have enough to deal with, to pile on, we had another storm develop, subtropical storm Theta. That's way out in the Atlantic. We'll get to that, but that did officially break the record now. 29 named storms. That makes this the most active hurricane season on record. But if you've been living through this one with us on Track in the Tropics, you know that it has been incessant this year. We've had some changes today with Tropical Storm Eta. Not much in terms of position. Look at that right now. Its motion is nothing. It's stationary right now, and look where it is. We had a system that made landfall in the Keys. Now it's parked just off the western coast of Cuba, and what we've seen today is some fluctuation with the intensity of the system, at least in terms of its showers and thunderstorms near the inner core. It's consolidated. The whole storm has gotten a bit smaller. We had a big flare-up, a burst of convection, showers and thunderstorms near the center that happened earlier this morning. Then by the late morning and around lunchtime, it looked like some dry air started to intrude into the system, and that cut it off just a little bit, leveled out. But what we've seen just over the last hour or two is another flare-up in convection, and that has a lot to do with the dry air that's in the vicinity of this system. We'll talk more about that. Right now, though, maximum sustained winds of about 60 miles per hour. This next 24 hours is very important. National Hurricane Center pointed out in their discussion, it's really this next period in the short term that the system has the possibility of some, at least, additional intensification. Still some warm sea surface temperatures in the southeastern Gulf of Mexico, although part of the system actually dealing with a bit of land interaction at this point. But you see off to the north, to the west, and to the south. So three sides almost surrounded by what is very dry air through at least the western half of the Gulf of Mexico. There is a whole lot of it. But of course, with this system sitting over warm sea surface temperatures, that's where it's drawing its energy from. The showers and thunderstorms grabbing some of that energy from the warm sea below and turning that into heat. That rises up. But what's happening here is as the showers and thunderstorms develop and grow taller, some of the air from surrounding the storm gets pulled into that circulation. And as we're showing you here with the water vapor, that is very dry air. So what we're seeing is kind of a bit of an oscillation over the course of the day today with the showers and thunderstorms. Big flare up, dry air gets pulled in, kind of chokes off some of that activity, puts the brakes on any intensification, and now another flare-up as it looks like the system is trying to overcome some of that dry air. So I think that's kind of the process that we're going to see taking place over the next 12 to 24 hours. This is the latest forecast track from the National Hurricane Center, which looks more of a track cone feature than yesterday. If you were watching kind of the ice cream cone we had yesterday, that is the latest forecast, the official one from the National Hurricane Center. And you see there is a window here through about tomorrow evening where this could approach Category 1 hurricane intensity once again. Conditions fairly favorable for development, at least not bad for development. Still some wind shear, still all the dry air I showed you. But as this system passes farther off to the north, more wind shear, more dry air, and eventually some slightly cooler sea surface temperatures, which matter this time of the year, especially as we're moving into November. Those sea surface temperatures cool off by a few degrees as the system continues to move off to the north. So fairly good confidence in the short term here, moving it into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. Still some impacts of possibility for us if you're watching here in Tampa. Still some question marks how close this gets to us. The center expected to stay off to our west, but with this being a lopsided system, still the possibility by late tomorrow, overnight into Thursday, and we could see some more downpours rolling on through with perhaps some gusty winds, maybe even briefly some tropical storm conditions, and we'll certainly be tracking that very closely for you. This is just one forecast model, the GFS. It's slightly farther east of where the European forecast model is. European takes a very weak system up into the Big Bend area, so still additional rain chances and gusty winds for us. GFS is a weaker system that pulls it more towards the nature coast, kind of dying as it reaches us by the end of the week with some drier conditions, thankfully, heading into the weekend and the early part of next week. So that is the good news. It does look like this system will weaken the farther it moves to the north. These are the sea surface temperatures right now. You look at that, low and mid 80s. That's warm water, a lot of fuel for this system. But as it moves farther off to the north, especially these shelf waters, they've really cooled off into the middle and upper 70s, which you would expect with it being the middle part of November, not August or September like we're looking at with all this activity happening in what's been a crazy season so far. This was the one I was talking about as we started off the broadcast, developed last night, subtropical storm Theta, south of the Azores. Max winds right now at 70 miles per hour. It's pretty close to being a hurricane intensity. That's the forecast path weakening as it approaches Europe and Africa heading into the weekend. And if that wasn't enough, one more area to watch. It's a tropical wave that's going to be moving into the central Caribbean. We know this is where ETA originally developed and became a strong system, Category 4 at landfall in Nicaragua. That water is still very warm. That environment looks to be pretty decent. 70% chance that we have yet another named storm by the time we get to the weekend in the Caribbean. That one looks to continue on a path farther off to the west, but it's still very early and we'll be watching that. So if you're wondering where that leaves us, that's a whole column, JB, of Greek names crossed off our list. It has been an unusually active season. Of course, a record breaker last night makes 29 named storms. In the short term, it's ETA that we're going to be watching very closely with still the possibility of a wide range of impacts with the rain, with the wind, maybe even a little surge across the west coast of Florida, all the way up into the Big Bend and points north from there, as there is still a decent amount of uncertainty long term where exactly this system will end up.
In the 2020 hurricane season. JB Buno, Julie Phillips here with you back, everybody, on Track in the Tropics. We're going to start to take your questions now, everybody, here in a meteorologist Q&A. Use the hashtags that we have here on your screen. Hashtag Hey Julie, hashtag Hey Ian. Ian is standing by here at the wall to continue to talk a little bit more about the systems that we're monitoring here, especially Tropical Storm ETA. And we'll get to some of the questions that we have coming in here on Facebook pages. I think we have on Facebook pages, we have WFLA's, WMBB, BR Proud, WGNO, KLFY. We have a lot of Facebook pages, WKRG in Alabama. We got a lot of them pulled up here. So we're going to start to take some of those questions if you use one of those hashtags. Again, hashtag Hey Julie, hashtag Hey JB, hashtag Hey Ian. The first one we have coming in here, I'm going to throw over to Julie. It's from Petra, hashtag Hey JB, Pensacola, Florida, can't handle anymore. Can we return to the sender? And this north movement that we have now on the system, I mean, we're talking about the panhandle being in play.
Absolutely. Yeah, the panhandle is definitely in play right now. You can see there's still uncertainty as we head into the end of this week. The system has been a really one where we've only known the next couple of days of where we've been kind of confident on where it's heading. So by the end of the week, the weekend, that's why the cone is much wider still, because there is still that uncertainty. Anywhere from Louisiana all the way through like the Big Bend to Florida is not out of the question of where we could maybe see this system make another landfall. The one thing we do have going for us, especially for the Pensacola area, if the system were to move in, cause some impacts, they would be fairly minor. This would be a weaker system. So it is definitely good news because I know you've already dealt with enough this season, so we do not need any more major impacts.
Got a ton of questions coming in here with our hashtags. The next one from Deborah here, hashtag Hey Ian, can that build to a hurricane? Is there chances for intensification? I think is what Deborah is asking here in the Facebook Live comment section.
Hey Deborah, good afternoon. I think that's absolutely a possibility. I don't think it would maintain that intensity for very long, though, thankfully. The next 12 to 24 hours, you did see that big flare-up of convection. This system has really done a pretty good job of transforming itself over the last 24 to 36 hours. When it was moving through the Keys, very broad system, some of that dry air interaction really shrank the size of the storm, and now it's pretty compact. You see this central dense overcast right here. It's done a decent job of essentially moistening up the environment immediately surrounding that inner core. So it has this small habitat that it's working in an otherwise unfavorable large-scale environment. So in the short term, that's why you did see the forecast for intensification from the National Hurricane Center. 12 to 24 hours, I think there is a window here where we could possibly, unfortunately, see this reach Category 1 hurricane intensity. But as it continues to slide off to the north from there, that's Wednesday morning. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., we're at 70 miles per hour. So it doesn't take much more from there for this to at least briefly sneak up into Category 1 hurricane intensity. That's slow motion, though. You see by the next day, 7 a.m., it's down to 65. By 7 a.m. Friday, it's down to 45. That's going to be the trend, gradual weakening as conditions get more hostile for the system the farther north it gets, and hopefully the closer it gets to land, the more the system's getting shredded by some of that wind shear and dry air, cooler sea surface temperatures. On this forecast path, should this hold, which thankfully hopefully it will, by the time it got to the panhandle or the top of the cone here, like Julie was mentioning, this is a weak system, a tropical depression that likely brings some heavy rainfall, some gusty winds, and that's about it. Nothing like we've experienced with some of these wild storms earlier this season. So this here would not be a very bad scenario. We're just going to have to watch very closely, JB, over the next day if this system can overachieve and change this forecast a little bit. But right now, this would not be a bad scenario.
Meteorologist Ian Oliver with the latest here on ETA. JB Buno, Julie Phillips also here with you again. For those of you just logging on here onto Facebook, onto an app, a website, a social media platform, use the hashtags that we have here in the comment section to ask a question to one of our team members. Hashtag Hey Julie, hashtag Hey Ian, hashtag Hey JB. We're looking for those comments right now in the Facebook Live comment section. Cheryl Colette from WMBB's Facebook page there in Panama City, hashtag Hey Julie. ETA scares me because of the slow speed. Does that mean intensive strengthening?
Hi, Cheryl. Well, that's a great question. You know, if this was September or even early October, yes, that would definitely make us nervous. A system just sitting out in the Gulf, that's when they tend to really strengthen rapidly. But you got to remember, we are already into mid-November, so our water temperatures just aren't what they were a couple months ago. You can see that right there. A little closer to Cuba, you've got the low 80s. It's a little bit of a better environment right now, but the farther north you go, the cooler the waters get. There's also a lot of wind shear this time of the year. It's just not like during the peak of hurricane season. And that's why we typically don't see a lot of activity right now. So while we do have some action out there, this is just not a situation where we would see rapid intensification. Like Ian mentioned, we're talking worst case scenario. This briefly becomes a Cat 1. That's the worst case scenario. Right now, the forecast is for this to remain a tropical storm.
We got a lot of great questions coming in here, folks, on Facebook Live. A tremendous amount of really good questions that are just now starting to come in. Again, we really appreciate them. So our Tracking the Tropics audience here, just fantastic. Megan Ann here, hashtag Hey Ian. Any chance this could hit Tampa?
Yeah, Megan, unfortunately, I think there is a chance, and that's why we're still on here with Tracking the Tropics. It's a storm that we need to be very vigilant about as we head on through the next couple of days because there's been so much variability in the forecast models regarding what is going to eventually happen with this system. You see the forecast cone, it's really not that far from Tampa, the whole Tampa Bay area. And what you also notice is, we showed you that in the beginning, it's a lopsided system. So even if that center of circulation stays offshore and stays west of us, there is a possibility that the center is close enough to us that some of the deepest moisture and some of the worst of what is Tropical Storm ETA could perhaps be right above us. And that's why it's an uncomfortably close forecast track to the Tampa Bay area. Right now we're outside the cone, but a path along this side of the cone would still bring some fairly significant impacts in the terms of some downpours moving through, maybe some tropical storm force wind gusts. If you live in a flood-prone area, maybe a little bit of surge or at least higher than normal tides. That'll be the time period that we're really watching for that by late tomorrow, Thursday, maybe the early part of Friday. We're hoping, obviously, that this weakens more quickly, moves farther off to the north and west, because in that solution, by the time it made it up to the northern Gulf Coast, which has, of course, gotten battered this season, this wouldn't be much of a storm at that point. A weaker system moving off to the north and west, maybe a slightly stronger system coming a little bit closer to us. So is it a possibility? Yes. Are we particularly concerned at this point? No. I do think you should plan for some higher than normal rain chances here in November, which is usually our driest month of the year. Likely some gusty winds with some of the downpours that roll on through over the next few days. Until we can finally get clear of this system, things get nicer again by the weekend. Next week, November proper, as you kind of might expect. This is usually one of our nicest months of the year, missing out on some of that low humidity and sunshine. It'll get here eventually when this terrible hurricane season finally wraps up, JB.
A lot of questions to get to here. Jenny Liflick here in the Facebook Live comment section, hashtag HeyJB. What's the ETA on ETA? Yeah, no, we have mentioned this dad joke before here, everybody on track in the tropics. She says, sorry, couldn't resist. Julie, when is the storm? It is a slow mover. When is it expected to arrive? Wherever it does end up.
It's like your friend that is always late. The system is just still kind of spitting out there, meandering in the Gulf. And we're going to be talking about this for a few more days. That's what we do know for sure. In terms of any landfall with this system, we're probably talking about the very end of this week into this upcoming weekend. So like around the Friday time frame. In terms of like if you live in the Tampa Bay area, I think we'll probably see some of our heaviest rainfall from the system actually maybe tomorrow, depending on how close it were to get to our west coast. We could see some of those outer rain bands, kind of like we saw on Monday with some of those downpours passing through. So it just kind of depends on where you're at, but I think we'll be talking about the system all week long.
Next question we have, we're going to throw over to Ian. It's from Suze Holmes, hashtag HJB. What about Panama City Beach?
Hey, Suze, good afternoon. Yeah, and the new rule, just saying in the comment section, if you say what's the ETA on ETA, you now have to give JB Buno $20. So it's getting very expensive as this week continues to go on. For Panama City, again, I think by the time this system were to reach Panama City, it would be in a much weakened state. So really the most impactful scenario here would be a slightly stronger system that wobbles a little bit farther off to the north and east and brings more of the west coast of Florida in play. That journey all the way up into the northeastern Gulf, eventually toward Panama City, we're dealing with more time over slightly cooler water. We're dealing with an increased wind shear, and we're seeing some of that drier air starting to punch into that center of circulation. So by Friday morning, official forecast from NHC has this as a lower end tropical storm. By Saturday, it's barely hanging on as a tropical storm. So you notice by the time it would even get up toward the panhandle, it's likely just a tropical depression. Some of these solutions are even weaker than that. The GFS is, the European forecast model is. That would be a great solution if this can get shredded over land, or over water, excuse me, where it's not bothering anybody, so it's kind of a bunch of nothing by the time it reaches land. That would be the best case scenario, especially with what's unfolded over the course of this season. Still remains to be seen. We'll be watching closely if this could get stronger in the short term. Could it wobble a little bit farther off to the east? But for Panama City, points west from there, this isn't one for you all to particularly be concerned about. Could it impact you? Certainly, but it's rain and a little bit of wind, not a big time event at all should the system head in this direction.
If for folks just joining us, yeah, keep using the ETA or ETA on ETA joke, and I'll just the $20 it comes from Ian.
That's a wealthy man right there, left side of the screen.
But Ian, it comes from your bank account. That's the footnote there. Of course, a lot more questions to get to here on Track in the Tropics. I'm going to throw you guys both up for this one. We're going to kind of do a 2-for-1 here because this is more of a broad discussion here to get to. Tristan Martin from WKRG's Facebook page, hashtag HeyJB. Are the tropics slowing down yet? Gulf Coast is tired. And then also Wayne Ashley here from KARK's Facebook page, joining us from Little Rock, Arkansas, that area. When does hurricane season officially end? I think, hashtag Hey Julie, I think that there's definitely, Julie, some fatigue that is starting to settle in here. Folks are just sick and tired of hearing about tropical storms and hurricanes, and us too. I mean,
yeah,
to say the least.
absolutely. I mean, typically November is the time we might have a random storm, kind of like Theta, pop up in the Atlantic, and a subtropical system. That's all we have. We don't often talk about a system in the Gulf this time of the year. Not that it can't happen, but if hurricane season officially goes through November 30th, things are starting to slow down, but there's still a couple of other things out there. Ian's showing you right there on the map.
Yeah, we've got this next tropical wave that, again, is reemerging into really where the warmest water is on our side of the hemisphere here, in the central portion of the Caribbean, headed towards Nicaragua and Honduras. That was where ETA developed into a powerful hurricane. This is where conditions are still, unfortunately, pretty decent in the middle part of November for some additional tropical development. That's why it's shaded in red, 70% chance. That's a high probability of us having yet another named storm. It would be given the name iota, well into the Greek alphabet now. High probability of that happening by the weekend, unfortunately. Still way too early to know where this exact system would be heading. But yeah, averages 12 named storms in any given hurricane season. We're at 29 now, so it's completely easy to understand why people are just burnt out from this hurricane season. We feel it. I mean, you've seen many editions of Tracking the Tropics this year. Unfortunately, we're almost to the end. End of this month is officially the end of the season. It got started early. Could we see a few named storms, maybe a named storm sneaking past the official end of the season? Certainly hope not. It's a possibility, but we've got at least 3 entities to watch as we move on through the next week.
Let's talk about an area that has seen one too many tropical storms and hurricanes this year. Darlene Washington from WJTV's Facebook page in Mississippi. Hashtag HeyJB, what about Mississippi? And then Raina joining us from WGNO's Facebook page. This is the New Orleans area, coastal Louisiana. Hashtag HeyJB, do we need to be concerned in southeast Louisiana, St. Charles, Metro, New Orleans, etc.? Ian, this area of the country was not really even in play with ETA if you rewind several days ago, but here we are now in this track continuing to shift west. So is the Louisiana coast, is Mississippi in play?
In play, yes. Should you be concerned? No. This is nothing like you've experienced earlier this season with a number of these tropical storms and hurricanes. This path along this portion of the cone, this would be a much weaker system. Cooler water, dry air, and wind shear. It all ramps up in a negative way for the system the closer you get towards Louisiana and Mississippi. So again, the system at this point, should it head in your direction, it's not going to be much of anything outside of some rain and maybe some gusty wind. So I completely understand why it's all eyes on this system, especially when you're seeing it intensifying in the short term. There just isn't the conditions there to sustain where it is right now, that intensity all the way up towards you all in the northern Gulf Coast. For folks watching from the Tampa Bay area, a slightly stronger solution would be on the east side of this cone. We'll be watching for that very carefully over the next day or two. But for folks northern Gulf Coast, keep an eye on it. It's going to impact your weather. It's going to impact your life as far as the rain chances go, certainly, and perhaps some gustier winds. But this is not going to be a strong storm should it head in that direction, JB. There aren't any forecast models that are suggesting that it would be.
Some terrific comments that are coming in here, everybody on Tracking the Tropics. JB Buno, Ian Oliver, Julie Phillips, left to right here on your screen, folks. We're going to be live for another 5 or so minutes to take some of the questions that we have coming in. I'm going to get the question after this following one is a great one that I'm very curious to get an answer from both of you on. But let's get to really quickly Marie Jones Piper from WKRG's Facebook page. I'm going to send this one over to Julie. Hashtag Hey Julie, even with a Florida landfall, how much could Alabama get? Our roofs are still tarped.
Yes, I know that is a tough situation to be in. So while you may have rain in your forecast, we're going to talk in regards to ETA impacts. So ETA with this system, if it were to make landfall, let's say in the panhandle, which is a definite possibility, that's kind of right in the center of the current cone from the National Hurricane Center, which I do think is looking more likely than Alabama. Remember, Alabama would then be on the western side of the system, and there's a lot of dry air over there. Currently, most of the moisture is well displaced east of the center of circulation of ETA. So if this system were to make landfall anywhere from Pensacola east and kind of stay on that track, then I don't think you're really going to have a whole lot in terms of rainfall from this system, because most of it is all on the eastern side of this system. So that is some good news for you.
Next question. I want to hear from both of you on this one. It's from Megan Sheremy from WGNO's Facebook page. Hashtag HeyJB. Do y'all think a storm will form in December? And this is a really fascinating question. And I've been doing some Googling here, you guys, at my desk, and hurricane records here. Apparently the strongest December hurricane on record goes back to 1925, and that there have also been December hurricanes, if I'm reading this correctly, 2005 with Epsilon. There was a Nicole in 1998, a Lily in 1984. Rare, but it has happened. Ian, you want to start, or Julie, or whoever wants to hop in here?
Go ahead.
My heart says, please God, no. My mind says maybe this year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Sea surface temperatures, they've been trending a bit above average, especially across portions of the basin. Could we squeeze one out along this loop current here, out along the portions of the Gulf Stream, Caribbean, where the sea surface temperatures are pretty warm? It's possible. We certainly hope not. We can't say. We're hoping that this is what's been just an awful season. We're hoping that this is kind of the last punch, these three systems, but we can't say that for sure. It's just early to mid portion of November. We still got a little ways to go.
Now, if there's a storm that forms on November 30th and then extends into December 1st, December 2nd, does that count, Julie, as a December storm, or does it have to form and be named in December to be a December storm? How does that work? Do you know?
I would think it would need to be named in December
To be officially a December storm.
Don't tell me on that, but that is my intuition of what like in terms of the storms that you looked up. But I think because it's 2020, I'd say, yeah, there's probably going to be one at the rate we're currently going. No scientific thought to that. But, you know, hopefully if there is one, it's going to be a fish storm, maybe a subtropical storm out in the Atlantic that doesn't impact anyone. So we can all hope.
Ian, no one wants a Christmas, Hanukkah,
Santa
New Year's.
has to divert across the Atlantic around the tropical system. Yeah, nobody wants that. Like Julie said, hopefully it stays out over water should one form. But this has been such an unusual season. We're talking about almost getting to the point 2.5 to 3 times the number of named storms that we see in an average season. There's been nothing average about this season, so nothing would really be surprising at this point.
We continue to be at a loss for words that we are this far into the Greek alphabet here with Eta and Theta, and we've talked about Beta and Zeta, or all the Etas. I'm just getting a little bit mixed up as to which storm went where. We've had so many of them here in the 2020 hurricane season, including what you see Ian and Julie here tracking in the center of your screen, everybody on Track in the Tropics. We've been hard at work here live in your hurricane headquarters to keep you posted with all the twists and turns regarding Tropical Storm Eta. We'll continue to do so. Our regularly scheduled episode, it comes back tomorrow. Wednesdays are when we are live, no matter what, hurricane, tropical storm or not. We are live Wednesdays, 2 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Central, and that's our regularly scheduled time for tomorrow. So we'll continue to track Eta and have the latest for you then here on Track in the Tropics with another live Q&A for all of the hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyJulie, hashtag HeyIan comments that we were unable to get to. We'll try to get to some more of them tomorrow in our regularly scheduled episode as we continue to monitor all the developments here with Tropical Storm Eta. For meteorologist Julie Phillips and Ian Oliver, I'm JB Buno. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time, folks, on Track in the Tropics.
Thank you for watching Tracking the Tropics.